My name's Dr. Laura Varnam and I'm the tutor in medieval English literature at University College, Oxford. I've always been a great reader. I was always reading books in the car and never looking out of the window. I absolutely love fantasy literature. So I read The Hobbit when I was very young, and then I read The Lord of the Rings for the first time when I was a teenager and was just fascinated by the myths and the history, and all of these are themes that you can find in Anglo-Saxon literature, which I now teach. And of course Tolkien himself was a professor of medieval literature here in Oxford. I've chosen Daphne du Maurier's novel Rebecca to talk about today. Daphne du Maurier has been a passion of mine ever since I first read one of her novels, The House on the Strand. But I knew that Rebecca is her most famous novel, it was her bestseller, so I thought, well, I'd better read Rebecca next and find out what all the fuss is about. When I first read the novel, I really bought into everything she was telling me. I thought that Rebecca was this threatening, wicked figure. I thought that Max de Winter was a very dashing Mr. Darcy, Mr. Rochester kind of figure. When I read the novel years later, I suddenly started to think about, well, we're reading this from the point of view of a first-person narrator. We're hearing what she thinks, but is this necessarily the way we should be reading the novel? It's very important that students are reading critically, that they're really thinking about the style of what they're reading. So not just the plot and the themes, but how a particular novel or a poem has been written. We often talk about that in Oxford in terms of close reading. So really close, minute attention to the detail of a particular passage. It's important when students are encountering novels for the first time to be very aware of the actual edition that they're looking at, partly because of the visual cues that it will give the student as to what kind of novel this is, what the genre might be, but also to be aware that if they're picking up perhaps older editions in second-hand bookshops, that they might be presenting the novel in a particular way, and that novelists' reputations change over time. The Virago is the most recent reprinting of the novel, and you can tell from what they've done with the front cover that they're very much going for the sort of gothic angle, the mystery, the suspense in the novel. But this is not how Rebecca has always been viewed in the past. Du Maurier was often advertised and promoted, much to her own dismay, as a romantic novelist. This is a particularly nice edition with a lovely dust jacket featuring the rhododendrons that feature in the opening chapter of the novel. The main character is going down the drive towards Mandalay, which is the house that you can see here through the leaves. It's also a rather nice edition because it's signed by Daphne du Maurier on the title page. We want, of course, students to be absolutely passionate about English literature. We want them to be reading widely. One of the reasons that's so important is that the English degree at Oxford requires a lot of reading. So if you're not someone who relishes the idea of a pile of 100 books, then perhaps Oxford is not the place for you. But if you can't wait to get stuck in, then the Oxford English course is fantastic because there's so much to read and so much to learn. What you might want to do is to read a novel that either responds to or is influenced by that novel. So if you've been reading Jane Eyre, you might want to read Wide Sargasso Sea, which was written by Jean Rhys in the 1960s. And Wide Sargasso Sea is a rewriting of Jane Eyre from the perspective of the mad woman in the attic, so-called, but it gives you a way of thinking about some of the themes and ideas of Jane Eyre in a slightly different way. It's a real privilege to teach here in Oxford, particularly to teach here at Univ, to be able to sit down and to have conversations about the literature that I'm passionate about with students who are just as passionate and keen as I am. I couldn't have a better job than this.